I was used to being the invisible child with the boring tech job, but when my father called this morning to brag about his billionaire partner and warned me not to embarrass him, a cold realization hit me. The man he worships is scheduled to walk into my boardroom at 9 in the morning on Tuesday, when those doors open. My father will learn that reputation can be bought at galas, but the truth always has its own schedule. My name is Riley Herrera, and at 34 years old, I still felt a phantom flinch whenever my phone vibrated with my father's specialized ringtone. It was a reflex I had honed over 3 decades of being the disappointment in a family of social climbers. A conditioned response that no amount of therapy or professional success seemed to fully erase. I was sitting in the corner office of Kestrel Harbor Systems, the company I had built from a mess of wires in a studio apartment into the leading cybersecurity firm for critical infrastructure in the tri-state area. From here, I could see the skyline of the city my father was so desperate to conquer. I picked up the phone. "Riley," Douglas Mercer's voice boomed through the speaker, bypassing pleasantries entirely. "I am calling to make sure you understand the stakes tonight. I cannot have any slip-ups." I swiveled my chair away from the view, facing the 3 monitors that displayed the real-time security protocols for a regional power grid my team was currently patching. "Hello to you too, Dad," I said, my voice steady, practiced. "I assume you are talking about the gala?" "The Spring Equinox Gala is not just a party. Riley," he snapped, the anxiety in his voice vibrating at a frequency only I seemed to be able to hear. "It is the event of the season, and more importantly, Calvin Wexler will be there." He said the name with a reverence usually reserved for religious deities. Calvin Wexler, the billionaire financier, the man whose private equity firm, Wexler Capital, could make or break industries with a single signature. "I heard," I said, keeping my eyes on the stream of code scrolling down my left monitor. "You mentioned him on Sunday, and last Thursday, and I think twice on Tuesday." "Because this is it, Riley. This is the big one," Douglas said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Wexler has finally agreed to put capital into the Emerald Heights development. Do you know what that means for us? For the family name? It means we are not just developers anymore. We are partners with the Wexler estate. We are arriving." I could hear the clinking of porcelain in the background. My mother, Elaine, was likely arranging flowers or critiquing the catering staff, hovering nearby to ensure Douglas stayed on message. "That is great, Dad," I said. And a part of me actually meant it. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to be successful so they would stop looking at me as a missed opportunity. "So, what time do you want Stuart and me to be there?" The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, thick with the discomfort of a man about to deliver an insult he felt was entirely justified. "Actually," Douglas said, clearing his throat, "that is what I called about. We think it would be better if you two sat this one out." I stopped typing. My hand hovered over the keyboard. "You invited us 3 months ago. I bought a table. And we appreciate the donation. Really, we do," he rushed to say. "But tonight is delicate. Calvin Wexler is a man of extreme refinement. He appreciates the classic aesthetic, the traditional social grace." He paused, searching for the words that would hurt the least but mean the most. "You know how you get, Riley? You start talking about servers and encryptions and things that bore people to tears, and you insist on wearing those pantsuits. They are bespoke tuxedos, Dad," I corrected quietly. "And I run a tech company. Talking about technology is what I do." "Exactly." He sounded vindicated. "And that is fine for your little world, but this is high society. We need charm. We need levity. Your sister, Madeline, she is bringing that new fiancé of hers, the cardiologist. They know how to work a room. Madeline knows how to make a man like Wexler feel important. She laughs at the right times. She wears the right gowns. You tend to make people feel like they are being analyzed." I closed my eyes. There it was. The eternal Mercer refrain. Madeline was the show pony. Riley was the draft horse. Madeline was the jewel. Riley was the rock. "Elaine agrees," Douglas added, invoking the Supreme Court of our household. She thinks you would be more comfortable at home. You have been working so hard on your computer thing. You sound tired. We do not want you falling asleep during the toast. The computer thing. Kestrel Harbor Systems had just secured a contract worth $40 million to overhaul the water treatment security for the county, and to my father, it was still just a computer thing. So, I am uninvited, I said, my voice flat. You are being spared, he corrected. Look, Riley, do not make this a drama. I have 10,000 things to do before 5 o'clock. Just stay home. Let us handle the big leagues. I will tell Wexler you sent your regards. Not that he would know who you are. We have to keep the image pristine. No loose ends. No awkward conversations about firewalls or whatever it is you do. Okay, Dad, I said. Have a good night. We will, he said, and the line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed it gently on the mahogany desk. I did not slam it. I did not throw it. I had learned a long time ago that reacting to Douglas Mercer was like feeding oxygen to a fire. It only made him burn brighter and hotter. I stared at the black screen of the phone. The rejection stung. Of course. It always did. It was a dull, familiar ache in the center of my chest. The feeling of being 18 years old again and telling them I was going to engineering school instead of finishing school. Watching their faces crumble as if I had announced I was joining a circus. They did it again, didn't they? The voice came from the doorway. I looked up to see Stuart leaning against the glass frame, his arms crossed over his chest. My husband. Stuart Blake was the only person in the world who saw me, really saw me, to the world and to my family. He was a quiet, unassuming lawyer who had latched on to the Mercer family orbit. To me, he was the brilliant legal mind who had fortified Kestrel Harbor's intellectual property since day one. He was my general counsel, my partner, and the only man who didn't feel threatened when I walked into a room and took charge. He walked over, his movement fluid and calm, and sat on the edge of my desk. He didn't reach out to touch me. He knew I needed space when I was processing a Mercer attack. He uninvited us, I said, picking up a pen and turning it over in my fingers. Said I would bore the billionaire. Said I do not fit the vibe. Apparently, Calvin Wexler is allergic to women in suits who understand how the internet actually works. Stuart let out a short, dry laugh. Calvin Wexler. That is the name he is parading around, the one and only. I said, Dad says Wexler is investing in the Emerald Heights project. He thinks this is his ticket to the inner circle. He told me not to embarrass him. He said, and I quote, "Let us handle the big leagues." Stuart looked at me, and I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. It was not anger at me, but for me, he hated them. He hated them with a quiet, burning intensity that he usually kept hidden behind his professional demeanor. Riley, he said softly, when are you going to tell them? I looked away, toward the city. Tell them what? That their daughter is not fixing printers in a basement. That Kestrel Harbor is valued at 3 times what Dad's entire real estate portfolio is worth on its best day. What is the point? Stuart. They do not understand the metrics. If it is not a building with their name on it, it is not real to them. That is not what I meant, Stuart said. I mean about the acquisition, about who we have been negotiating with for the last 6 months. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I keep the world separate. It is safer that way. If Douglas knew I was operating at this level, he would be in here every day trying to leverage my contacts for his strip mall developments. He would drain this company dry trying to look important. He is doing a pretty good job of trying to look important right now, Stuart noted, using Wexler's name like a shield. Let him have his moment, I said, feeling the exhaustion settle in my bones. If Wexler is actually investing in his project, good for him. Maybe he will finally make enough money to stop caring about what everyone else thinks. Stuart stood up, smoothing the front of his jacket. You are too good to them. Riley, you always have been. I am just tired. Stuart, I am tired of fighting for a seat at a table I do not even want to sit at. Fair enough, he said. But you should know. The final schedule for the due diligence meeting came in while you were on the phone with him. I straightened up, the business instinct instantly overriding the personal drama. And are we still on for Tuesday? We are, Stuart said. He had a strange look on his face, a mixture of amusement and apprehension. But there has been a change in the lineup. What kind of change? I asked, pulling my keyboard closer. Did they send another VP of operations? I told them I am done explaining our encryption architecture to middle managers who do not have the clearance to sign off on the integration. No, Stuart said. No more middle managers. The acquiring firm wants to close this personally. They view our tech as the keystone for their new digital asset division. They are sending the chairman. I paused. The chairman of the parent holding company. Yes, I frowned. We had been negotiating with a shell company, a standard practice in high-level tech acquisitions to prevent market speculation. The holding company was named Obsidian Ventures, generic enough to be anyone, but if the chairman was coming, that meant the veil was lifting. Who is it? Stuart? I asked. Stuart pointed to my calendar on the screen. Check your Tuesday slot, 9 o'clock in the morning. I clicked on the calendar icon. The block of time was highlighted in deep blue, the color code for critical/executive level. Meeting Strategic Partnership Acquisition Finalization. Attendees Riley Herrera, CEO, Stuart Blake, GC, Board of Directors. External Delegation Lead Calvin Wexler. I stared at the name. The letters seemed to rearrange themselves, dancing before my eyes before settling into a cold, hard reality. Calvin Wexler, the man my father had just spent 20 minutes deifying, the partner who was apparently too refined to be in the same room as Douglas Mercer's tech-obsessed daughter, the billionaire whose favor my family was desperately clawing for at a gala tonight. He was coming here, to my office, to my boardroom. Stuart, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Is this confirmed? Direct from his chief of staff, Stuart said. He wants to meet the architect of the system. He told our liaison that he does not trust a system he cannot look in the eye. He is coming to see you. Riley. A cold chill ran down my spine, followed immediately by a flush of heat. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical cut. My father was out there right now, probably tying his bow tie, rehearsing the jokes he would tell to charm Calvin Wexler's entourage. Terrified that I might show up and ruin his image. He was selling a version of himself, the wealthy, connected patriarch, while hiding his embarrassing daughter. And on Tuesday morning, at 9 o'clock, the man he was bowing down to was going to walk through my doors. I looked at Stuart. Does he know? Does Wexler know who I am, who my father is? The dossier on you is purely professional, Stuart said. You are Riley Herrera. You have never used the Mercer name in business. As far as Wexler's team is concerned, you are a self-made engineer from the State University. They do not know you are the daughter of the man trying to get them to fund a condo complex in the suburbs. I swiveled my chair back toward the window. The city lights were starting to flicker on as the sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere out there, in a ballroom filled with $5,000 plates and cheap champagne. My family was about to celebrate their arrival. Dad said, "Don't embarrass him," I murmured, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. He did, Stuart agreed. He said, "I do not belong in the room with people like Wexler." He did. I looked at the reflection of my office in the glass. The sleek lines, the awards on the shelf, the quiet hum of a company that protected the heartbeat of the city. This was not a gala. This was not a social club. This was the arena where real power was traded, not in favors and smiles, but in equity and infrastructure. Well, I said, turning back to my husband, it looks like he is right. I do not belong in their room. I clicked on the calendar invite and hit confirm, because Calvin Wexler is coming to mine. I stood up and walked over to the garment bag hanging on the back of my door. Inside was the navy blue Italian suit I had planned to wear to the gala before the phone call. I wouldn't need it tonight. I would save it for Tuesday. Stuart, I said, my voice hardening, shedding the daughter and fully inhabiting the CEO. Get the files ready. I want a full breakdown of Wexler's current portfolio, specifically his exposure to real estate liabilities, and get the non-disclosure agreements prepped for the board meeting. If we are going to do this, we are going to do it by the book. You are not going to warn Douglas, Stuart asked, though he already knew the answer. I thought about the phone call. I thought about the years of being seated at the children's table. I thought about Madeline's pitying glances and my mother's disappointment. No, I said. Dad wants to play in the big leagues fine. In the big leagues. You do your own due diligence. He is going to be blindsided, Stuart said. He told me that reputation is everything, I said, picking up my tablet to leave for the night. He is about to learn that in America, you can buy a reputation at a dinner party, but the truth has its own schedule. I walked out of the office, the click of my heels echoing on the polished concrete floor. Tuesday was less than 24 hours away. I had less than a day to prepare to meet the man who owned my father's soul. And when those elevator doors opened on the 24th floor, I wouldn't be Douglas Mercer's awkward daughter. I would be the woman holding the pen. The drive home from the office was usually my decompression chamber, a 40-minute stretch of highway where I could transition from the architect of digital fortresses to a human being who enjoyed a glass of red wine. But tonight, the silence of the car felt heavy, pressing against my temples. The city lights blurred past, not as beacons of progress, but as reminders of a timeline I had stepped out of 16 years ago. I was 18 years old when I committed my first act of unforgivable treason against the Mercer family legacy. The memory was as sharp as broken glass. It was a humid Tuesday in late August, the kind of day that made your clothes stick to your skin. My friends, the daughters of bankers, senators, and real estate moguls, were all packing their Louis Vuitton trunks for liberal arts colleges where they would major in art history or communications. It was the path. It was the safe road that led to charity boards, country club memberships, and eventually, a marriage that merged two portfolios. I had stood in the foyer of our colonial mansion, gripping a battered duffel bag, and told Douglas and Elaine that I was not going to the finishing school they had selected. I was going to the State Technological Institute on a partial scholarship to study systems engineering. I could still see the vein throbbing in Douglas's forehead. He did not yell. Yelling was for the help. He just looked at me with a profound, terrifying disappointment. He told me I was choosing to be a laborer. He said I was throwing away my pedigree to play with wires like a mechanic. "You are difficult, Riley," he had said, pouring himself a scotch at 2 p.m. "You have always been difficult to understand. Why can you not just be pleasant?" That word had haunted me for a decade. Pleasant, my sister, Madeline, was pleasant. She was 5 years older, a vision of blonde curls and effortless charm. Madeline knew exactly when to laugh at a dull joke. She knew which fork to use for the salad and which for the fish without thinking. She was the currency my father used to buy his way into rooms he was not invited to. When Madeline got engaged to a man from a prominent oil family, Douglas acted as if he had won the lottery. He spent weeks talking about the wedding, the guest list, the implications for his social standing. I was the glitch in their software. While Madeline was fitting dresses for the symphony ball, I was in a windowless basement office that smelled of stale coffee and damp drywall, building Kestrel Harbor systems. I was 22, living on instant noodles and adrenaline. I had refused to take a single dime from Douglas. I knew that money from him came with strings, chains, really, that would bind me to his whims forever. So I took the hard road. Those early years were not glamorous. There is a mythology in America about the garage startup. The romantic struggle before the billions. The reality was much uglier. It was 3 o'clock in the morning panic attacks because payroll was due in 48 hours and the bank account had less than $500 in it. It was wearing the same blazer to 3 different meetings and praying no one noticed the frayed cuff. I remembered the lowest point vividly. It was a rainy November afternoon. I had spent 6 months courting a regional logistics firm, building a custom security protocol that would have put Kestrel on the map. We were days away from signing. I had already hired 2 new developers based on that promise. Then, the call came. The client's nephew had started an IT company, and they were giving the contract to him. Nepotism, the very thing I was running from, had reached out and slapped me in the face. I sat on the floor of that cheap office, surrounded by server racks that hummed with heat, and I cried for exactly 10 minutes. Then I stood up, washed my face with cold water from the bathroom sink, and went back to work. That was the day I decided Kestrel Harbor would not just be good, it would be undeniable. I pivoted the entire company toward operational technology security, protecting the physical hardware of power plants, water treatment facilities, and traffic grids from cyber threats. It was unsexy. It was complicated. It was terrifyingly high stakes, and it was exactly where I belonged. When the company finally broke through, when we secured the contract to protect the Port Authority's automated cranes, I made my first $1 million in profit. I remembered telling my parents at Thanksgiving dinner, I did not brag. I just mentioned that business was good, that we were stable. Elaine had patted my hand, her eyes scanning the room to see if anyone important was watching. "That is nice, dear," she had said, her voice airy and dismissive. "As long as it is stable, you know, Madeline's husband just bought her a villa in Tuscany. Isn't that romantic?" They did not ask about the technology. They did not ask about the employees I was responsible for. To them, my work was a hobby that had gotten out of hand. Something cute I did to pass the time until I found a husband who could take care of me. But I had found a husband. I had found Stuart. Stuart Blake was the anomaly in my life. We met during a copyright dispute where he was representing the opposing counsel. He had destroyed my argument in court with such surgical precision that I hired him 2 weeks later. Stuart did not look at me and see a Mercer. He did not see a woman trying to play a man's game. He saw a CEO. When I legally changed my last name to Herrera, my maternal grandmother's maiden name, Stuart was the only one who understood. I did not do it to hide. I did it to clarify. I wanted every contract I signed, every award I won, every check I cashed to be free of the Mercer shadow. I wanted to know, with absolute certainty, that when I walked into a room, I was there because I deserved to be, not because my father had played golf with the organizer. "Herrera," Stuart had said, testing the sound of it on his tongue the day the paperwork came through. "It sounds like steel. It suits you." While I was building a fortress of steel and code. Douglas Mercer was building a house of cards. Over the last 7 years, I had watched my father's obsession with social climbing morph from a hobby into a mania. He was terrified of being irrelevant. He poured millions of dollars into galas, charities he did not care about, and country clubs that tolerated him only as long as his checks cleared. He was chasing a ghost, the old money aesthetic that you could not buy. No matter how hard you tried, he viewed people as rungs on a ladder. If you could not help him climb, you were invisible. That was why he dismissed me. In his mind, a daughter in tech was a social liability. I was too sharp, too direct, too new money. He wanted soft edges and compliance. He wanted Madeline. I pulled my car into the driveway of the house Stuart and I had bought 3 years ago. It was a modern, architectural structure made of glass and stone, hidden away in the hills, far from the manicured lawns of my parents' neighborhood. It was quiet here. I walked inside, kicking off my heels in the foyer. The house was dark, save for the glow of the tablet Stuart had left on the kitchen island. A glass of Cabernet was waiting for me, breathing next to the device. I took a sip of the wine, letting the oak and tannins wash away the taste of my father's earlier phone call. Then, I picked up the tablet. Stuart had compiled the deep dive intelligence on Calvin Wexler and his conglomerate. I swiped through the PDF, my eyes scanning the data with the practiced speed of an analyst. Calvin Wexler was not just a billionaire, he was a gravitational force. The dossier was terrifying in its scope. Wexler Capital did not just invest, they colonized. They owned the fiber optic lines that carried data across the Atlantic. They owned the logistics fleets that moved grain from the Midwest to Asia. They held controlling interests in 3 of the 5 largest commercial real estate insurers in the country. Wexler was famous for one thing above all else: his due diligence. The man did not gamble. If he put money into something, it was because he had already calculated the outcome to the 4th decimal point. There was a quote highlighted in the report from a profile in the Wall Street Journal 5 years ago. "I do not bet on companies. I bet on character. A balance sheet can be faked. Character cannot." I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Douglas was out there right now, at the gala, parading around as Wexler's partner. He believed he had charmed this man. He believed he had sold Wexler on the Mercer brand. But as I looked at the portfolio map, I saw the truth. Wexler's interest in my father's Emerald Heights project was a rounding error to him. It was a microscopic blip. Why would a man who owned global supply chains care about a luxury condo development in the suburbs? Unless he didn't. Unless the condos were just the bait. I scrolled to the final page of the brief, the section regarding the upcoming acquisition of my company, Kestrel Harbor. We had been negotiating with Obsidian Ventures, a nondescript holding company, but Stewart's digging had confirmed that Obsidian was a direct subsidiary of Wexler Capital. The pieces slammed together in my mind. Wexler wasn't coming to town for my father's real estate project. That was the cover. He was coming for the infrastructure security technology that controlled the city's power grid. He was coming for my work. My father was just the local guide, the useful idiot who thought he was the main character in a play where he was barely an extra. I tapped the calendar icon to check the schedule for Tuesday morning again. Stewart had updated the event details based on the latest correspondence from Wexler's executive office. There, in the notes section, was a new line of text, highlighted in red. It was a direct instruction from Calvin Wexler's office, stripping away the layers of corporate bureaucracy I had been dealing with for months. Note from Chairman's office, Mr. Wexler requests the immediate presence of the CEO, Mrs. Riley Herrera. No legal proxies, no intermediaries. He wishes to verify the architect personally. I set the tablet down on the cold marble counter. The silence in the house felt different now. It was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence before a detonation. My father thought he was keeping me away from the table to save his reputation. He had no idea that the man he worshipped was bypassing him entirely to speak to the daughter he had spent a lifetime hiding. I took another sip of wine. Tuesday was going to be a bloodbath. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the sight of blood. The blue light of my smartphone was the only thing competing with the low amber glow of the kitchen pendants. While my husband, Stewart, was chopping shallots with the rhythmic precision of a metronome, I was virtually attending the event I had been banned from. The Spring Equinox Gala was unfolding in real time on social media, a parade of silk, diamonds, and forced smiles set against the gilded backdrop of the Grand Marquis Hotel. My mother, Elaine, was operating at peak performance. Her Instagram feed was a relentless barrage of updates, each one carefully curated to project the image of a family at the zenith of its power. I scrolled past a photo of the platinum donor wall. There, in bold, gold-leaf lettering, was the Mercer family. I knew exactly how much that inscription had cost. It was $50,000. $50,000 for a fleeting moment of recognition. A sum that could have funded a scholarship program or upgraded the servers at a local school. But to Douglas and Elaine Mercer, it was not an expense. It was an admission fee. A notification banner slid down the top of my screen. It was a text from my sister. Madeline, Mom wants to know if you are sulking. Please do not be mad. You know how Dad gets when he is nervous. Do not make drama. Okay, I stared at the words. Do not make drama. It was the Mercer family motto. Second only to image is everything. The irony was suffocating. I was sitting at my granite island in a cashmere sweater, reviewing quarterly risk assessments for a corporation that protected the national energy grid. Yet I was being treated like a petulant teenager who had been grounded for bad grades. I did not reply. There was nothing to say. I placed the phone face down on the cool stone counter. But the image of the gala burned behind my eyelids. You are doing it again, Stuart said. He did not look up from the pan where the risotto was sizzling. You are hurting your own feelings on purpose. It is a form of self-harm. Riley. I am just monitoring the situation, I said, picking up my glass of wine. It is market research. It is masochism, he corrected gently. Put the phone away. The risotto will be ready in 10 minutes. I use that aged Parmesan you like. I tried to listen to him. I tried to focus on the domestic tranquility we had built together, this sanctuary away from the noise, but the pull was too strong. I flipped the phone back over, and then I saw it. It was a photo posted by the official account of the City Business Journal. The caption read, Titans of Industry Align at the Equinox Gala. In the center of the frame stood Calvin Wexler. He looked exactly as the dossiers described, impeccable, predatory, and utterly at ease in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. He was not smiling. He was merely existing, radiating a gravitational pull that bent the room toward him and standing right next to him. Beaming with an intensity that bordered on manic was my father. Douglas Mercer looked like a man who had been starving for decades and had finally been allowed to sit at the banquet. His hand was hovering near Wexler's shoulder, not quite touching, but close enough to imply intimacy. His head was tilted back in laughter. Likely at a joke he had made himself, it was a look of pure, unadulterated validation. He had made it. He was standing next to the billionaire. I zoomed in on the image. Wexler's eyes were not on my father. They were scanning the room, cold and detached. He looked like a man checking his watch, waiting for the real work to begin. He looks happy, I whispered, the bitterness coating my tongue. He got exactly what he wanted. He got a photo op, Stuart said, sliding a bowl of steaming risotto in front of me. Eat. I picked up my fork, but before I could take a bite, my tablet, which was propped up against the fruit bowl, lit up with a crimson alert. It was not a social media notification. It was a Priority 1 flag from Kestrel Harbor's automated market intelligence system. I dropped the fork. Hold on. Riley, Stuart warned. This is not family drama, I said, my voice shifting into professional gear. This is the algorithm. It just flagged a massive volume of dark pool movement. I tapped the screen, expanding the data visualization. My breath hitched. The software tracked unspoken shifts in stock ownership and private equity maneuvers within the cybersecurity sector. Usually, it was a flat line of predictable trades. Tonight, it was a spike. What is it? Stuart asked, sensing the change in my demeanor. He walked around the island to look over my shoulder. Look at the acquisition patterns, I said, tracing the jagged red line. In the last 48 hours, 3 of our mid-sized competitors have had their debt purchased by anonymous shell corporations. All the debt is being consolidated into a single holding vehicle. Stuart squinted at the screen. That is aggressive. Who is the buyer? I ran a quick cross-reference query. The system churned for a few seconds before spitting out a probability match. The shell companies all traced back to a registered agent in Delaware, the same agent used by Wexler Capital for their distressed asset division. It is him, I said, feeling a cold realization wash over me. It is Wexler. He is buying up the competition, Stuart asked. No, I said, shaking my head. He is not buying the companies. He is buying their debt. He is buying leverage. He is clearing the board. I looked back at the photo of my father laughing next to Wexler. Douglas thought he was charming a potential investor for his condos. He had no idea he was standing next to a shark who was currently in the process of eating the entire ocean. Wexler wasn't just coming to talk to me on Tuesday about a partnership. He was systematically removing my alternatives. He was isolating Kestrel Harbor so that when he walked into my boardroom, he would be the only game in town. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. And my father was completely oblivious, thinking he was the one pulling strings. I went back to the social media feed. Needing to see the contrast again, I found a video posted by a local real estate broker, a frenemy of my father's. The camera was panning across the ballroom, catching snippets of conversation. The camera swept past my father. He was holding a champagne flute, holding court with a small group of local developers. The audio was muddy, loud with jazz music and chatter, but Douglas's voice projected clearly. "Oh, no, Riley is not here tonight," he was saying, waving his hand dismissively. "You know how it is. She is very technical, works for a small tech support firm downtown. She prefers computers to people. I told her, 'Honey, you stay home and rest. Leave the networking to the adults.'" I froze. The video looped, playing the sentence again. Small tech support firm. He wasn't just hiding me. He was actively diminishing me. He was rewriting reality to fit his narrative. If he admitted I was the CEO of a major defense contractor, it would raise questions. It would make him look less like the patriarch and more like the beneficiary. So, he turned me into IT support. He turned the woman who secured the city's water supply into someone who rebooted routers for a living. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Stuart's grip was firm, grounding. "He does not know," Stuart said quietly. "He is terrified. Riley, he is terrified that if people knew who you actually were, they would stop looking at him." "He is lying to them," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had suppressed for too long. "He is standing 5 feet away from the man who is trying to corner my company. And he is telling people I fix printers." Stuart walked back to his side of the island and picked up his wine glass. He took a long, slow sip, his eyes dark. "There is something I haven't told you," he said. I looked up. "What?" "About Wexler," Stuart said. I didn't want to bring it up because I thought it was ancient history, but seeing him make moves on the market, you need to know. "Know what?" "7 years ago," Stuart began. "Before I met you, I was a junior associate on the litigation team for a pharmaceutical merger. It was a hostile takeover. Wexler Capital was the aggressor. I was tasked with deposing their VP of strategy." "Okay," I said, waiting for the connection. "Wexler showed up to the deposition," Stuart said. "He didn't have to. It was below his pay grade. But he sat in the corner of the room for 6 hours, just watching. He never said a word. He just studied us. At the end of the day, I dismantled their witness. I found a loophole in their filing that stalled the takeover for 6 months. You won." "We settled," Stuart corrected. "But as we were leaving, Wexler walked up to me. He looked me right in the eye. He didn't shake my hand. He just said, 'That was efficient. Mr. Blake, I will remember that.'" I stared at my husband. "He knows you? He never forgets a face, Riley, and he certainly never forgets a loss, even a small one." Stuart's expression was grim. "When he walks into that boardroom on Tuesday, he is not just going to see the CEO he wants to acquire. He is going to see the lawyer who cost him time and money 7 years ago sitting at her right hand." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. The gala, the insults, the social climbing, it all felt like a grotesque puppet show distracting us from the real danger. My father was dancing on the edge of a volcano, thinking it was a stage. My phone rang. The screen lit up with the name, Dad. I looked at the time. It was 11:30 at night. The gala was winding down. "Do not answer it," Stuart said. "I have to," I said. "I need to hear it. I need to hear him say it." I swiped green and put the phone on speaker. "Riley?" Douglas's voice was booming, slightly slurred, thick with the euphoria of expensive alcohol and perceived victory. "You should have seen it. It was magnificent." "I am sure it was." "Dad," I said, my voice dead calm. "Wexler," he practically shouted. "Calvin Wexler. He spent 20 minutes with me. 20 minutes. Do you know what that is worth in billable time? He listened to my entire pitch for Phase 2 of Emerald Heights. He nodded. He actually nodded. "That sounds promising," I said. "Promising? It is a done deal." Douglas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He put his hand on my shoulder, right on my shoulder, and he said, "Douglas, loyalty is a rare currency. Your family seems trustworthy. I closed my eyes. Trustworthy. Wexler was testing him. He was probing the perimeter, seeing how easily Douglas could be manipulated. And I have to say, Douglas continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, it was a stroke of genius keeping you away tonight. Really. I mean, no offense, honey. But the conversation was very high level. Macroeconomics, global trends. If you had been there, with your, technical questions, it would have killed the mood. You would have bored him to death. My hand gripped the edge of the granite counter so hard my knuckles turned white. He actually asked about my children, Douglas rambled on. Can you believe that a billionaire asking about my kids? I told him Madeline is marrying a surgeon. He was very impressed. Very impressed. Did you mention me? I asked. I couldn't help myself. I had to know. Briefly, Douglas said, dismissing me with a tone usually reserved for a minor inconvenience. I just told him you are settled, working in IT, kept it simple. We didn't want to complicate the narrative, right? He likes success. Riley, visible success. Visible success. I am glad you had a good night, Dad, I said. Good. It was the best night of my life, he declared. We are in, Riley. The Mercers have arrived. Anyway, go to sleep. Do not stay up too late staring at those screens. It is bad for your skin. The line clicked dead. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, the dial tone humming in the air like a flat line. Stuart didn't say anything. He just watched me. I picked up the phone and set it down gently. I didn't feel like crying. I didn't feel like screaming. I felt something else entirely. It was a cold, hard calcification of my resolve. For years, I had tried to manage their expectations, to soften the blow of my reality, to protect them from the truth of who I was because I was afraid it would hurt them. But Douglas had just made it clear. He didn't want the truth. He wanted a story where he was the hero and I was the footnote. Are you okay? Stuart asked. I walked over to the tablet and closed the risk assessment file. I am done, I said. Done with what? I am done fixing it, I said. Looking at my husband. I was going to call him tomorrow. I was going to warn him. I was going to tell him to be careful because Wexler is a shark. I was going to try to save him from looking stupid. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkness where the city lights shimmered. But he prefers the lie, I said. So, I am going to let him have it. I am not going to say a word. I turned back to Stuart, my face composed, my eyes dry. Let the schedule stand. Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock. If Wexler wants to play games, we will play. And if my father wants to live in a fantasy world, I paused, thinking of the trustworthy comment. Then he can watch it burn down from the front row. I picked up my wine glass and drained it in one swallow. The gala was over. The party was finished. Now, it was time for business. Tuesday morning did not begin with sunlight. It began with armor. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my dressing room, fastening the buttons of my charcoal gray suit. It was not a purchase from a department store rack. It was bespoke, cut from Italian wool that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. I adjusted the collar of my silk blouse, ensuring it sat high and rigid against my neck. I pulled my hair back, twisting it into a knot so tight it pulled at my temples, securing it with 3 black pins. No loose strands, no softness. I applied my makeup with the precision of a restoration artist. Sharp eyeliner. Matte lipstick in a shade that matched the blood I was expecting to see in the water. I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back at me was not Douglas Mercer's daughter. She was not Madeline's sister. She was the CEO of Kestrel Harbor Systems, and she was ready for war. My phone vibrated on the marble vanity. I knew who it was before I looked. It was 7:45 in the morning. I picked it up. Riley, my father's voice came through, breathless and rapid. I hope you are awake. I have been up since 5. I am awake, Dad, I said, putting the phone on speaker as I slipped my feet into black stiletto heels. You missed a masterclass last night. Douglas said. He sounded manic, his voice vibrating with an adrenaline high that hadn't faded since the gala. Wexler. He is the real deal. I spoke to his people again this morning. They are talking about doubling the initial capital injection for Emerald Heights. Doubling it. Riley. Do you know what that means? It means a lot of liquidity, I said, checking my briefcase to ensure the tablet was fully charged. It means we are chosen, he corrected, his tone turning reverent. It means he sees the vision. He sees the Mercer potential. I told your mother this morning. This is it. This is the legacy. I walked out of the bedroom and down the hallway. Stuart was already waiting by the front door, holding 2 travel mugs of black coffee. He wore his Navy litigation suit, the one he wore when he planned to bury someone in paperwork. He looked at me, saw the ice in my eyes, and nodded once. That is great, Dad, I said into the phone, my voice devoid of inflection. You know, Douglas continued, and I could hear the sound of him pacing on the other end, his leather shoes squeaking on his hardwood floors. I was thinking about you, about your situation. I paused at the door, my hand on the latch. My situation. Yes, this little tech shop you run, he said. I know you think it is important, and I am sure it keeps you busy. But looking at a man like Calvin Wexler, the way he commands a room, the way he moves assets around like chess pieces, it makes you realize how small the technical side of things really is. I looked at Stuart. He tightened his grip on the coffee mug, his jaw clenching. Does it? I asked. Of course it does, Douglas said, oblivious to the cliff edge he was dancing on. You should learn from him, Riley. If you ever get the chance to be in a room with someone of that caliber, which, let us be honest, is unlikely in your field, you should just watch. Stop playing with computers and look at how real business is done. Maybe then you wouldn't struggle so much to be taken seriously. The insult landed with a dull thud. It didn't hurt, not anymore. It just confirmed the coordinates of the target. I will keep that in mind, I said. I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. I have to go. Right, Douglas said dismissively. Go reboot some servers. Just remember, when the Emerald Heights deal closes, I expect you to show up for the ribbon cutting. Dress appropriately this time. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I just pressed the red icon and slid the phone into my pocket. He told me to stop playing with computers, I told Stuart as we walked to the car. Stuart opened the passenger door for me. In 2 hours. He is going to wish you had. The drive to the Kestrel Harbor headquarters was silent. The city was waking up, a gray sprawl of concrete and steel under a heavy sky. We pulled into the underground garage, bypassing the general employee lot and parking in the reserved executive bay. We took the private elevator to the 24th floor. The atmosphere in the office was electric. My staff knew. They didn't know the personal stakes. I had kept my maiden name and my family history sealed in a lead box. But they knew who was coming. You could feel the tension in the way the receptionist typed, in the hushed conversations by the water cooler, the chairman of Obsidian Ventures, the king of Wexler Capital. I walked straight to the boardroom. It was a cavernous space, dominated by a 20-foot table made of reclaimed walnut and glass. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the harbor, the very infrastructure my software protected. My board of directors was already seated. There was Marcus, a former admiral who understood chain of command. There was Sarah, a venture capitalist who had backed me when I was 24. There were 3 others, serious men and women who had seen Kestrel Harbor grow from a startup to a titan. They looked up as I entered. Good morning, I said. My voice was calm, projected from the diaphragm. The Wexler delegation is 5 minutes out. I took my seat at the head of the table. I did not sit on the side. I sat at the head. The chair was high-backed, leather, imposing. Stuart sat to my immediate right. He opened his laptop, the screen displaying the finalized merger agreement and the non-disclosure contracts. Are we expecting hostilities? Marcus asked, noting the rigidity of my posture. We are expecting clarity, I replied. Mr. Wexler is known for his aggressive due diligence, I intend to demonstrate that our defenses are impenetrable. The clock on the wall ticked. 8:58. I folded my hands on the table. I focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I visualized my father's face from the gala photos, that desperate, eager smile. Then I visualized the code that ran the city's power grid. One was chaos, the other was order. I was the order. 8:59. The elevator chimed in the lobby. I could hear the muffled sounds of greeting from my executive assistant, then the heavy rhythmic thud of expensive shoes on the carpeted hallway. There were multiple footsteps, a phalanx. The double doors to the boardroom were mahogany, heavy and solid. They swung open. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Calvin Wexler entered first. He was taller than he looked in pictures. He wore a navy suit that cost more than the average American salary. His hair was silver, swept back with severe precision. His face was a map of calculated risks and ruthless victories. He did not look at the view. He did not look at the board members. He looked straight at the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, expecting to find his equal. Behind him trailed his entourage, a CFO with a nervous tic, 2 legal sharks carrying thick binders, and a personal assistant tapping furiously on a phone. Wexler took 2 steps into the room and stopped. His eyes swept the table and landed on me. For a second, there was nothing. No recognition, no spark. Just a cold assessment of a woman sitting in the seat of power. He likely assumed I was a placeholder. An executive assistant who had taken the wrong chair, or perhaps a figurehead. I stood up. I did not smile. I did not extend a hand immediately. I just stood, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Mr. Wexler," I said. My voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Welcome to Kestrel Harbor Systems." Wexler's eyes narrowed. He took another step forward, his gaze locking onto mine with the intensity of a weapon system acquiring a target. "I am Riley Herrera," I continued, keeping my chin high. "Founder and CEO." The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the silence of a library. It was the silence of a vacuum. Wexler froze. He looked at me. Really looked at me. He scanned my face, cataloging the features, the shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes. I could see the gears turning in his mind. The massive, unparalleled processor of a billionaire financier crunching the data. He looked down at the nameplate on the table, Riley Herrera, CEO. Then his eyes darted to the wall behind me. Hanging there, framed in simple black wood, was my engineering degree from the State Institute, and next to it, a small, faded photograph of the original Kestrel team in the basement office. He looked back at me. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a flash of genuine, unmasked shock. "Herrera," he said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. He took a step closer, ignoring his own team behind him. He looked at Stewart, who was staring back with a calm, predatory gaze. Wexler remembered. I saw the flicker in his eyes. He recognized the lawyer who had stalled him 7 years ago. Then he looked back at me. The connection snapped into place. "Mercer never said," Wexler muttered, his voice low, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. He stopped himself. He realized, in that split second, that he had walked into a trap. Not a trap I had set, but a trap my father had built for himself. He realized that the partner he had been courting, the man he had just promised millions of dollars to, was the father of the CEO he was trying to acquire. And he realized that the father had absolutely no idea. The implications were catastrophic. Conflict of interest, insider trading risks, due diligence failure. It was all flashing behind his eyes. My board members shifted in their seats, confused by the tension. They didn't know the name Mercer. They didn't understand why the billionaire looked like he had just seen a ghost. Wexler cleared his throat. He regained his composure instantly, the mask of the Titan sliding back into place, but his eyes remained wary. He did not sit down. "Ms. Herrera," he said. His voice was different now, careful. "Before we begin the agenda." "Yes," I asked. He glanced at his own legal team, then at my board. He raised a hand, signaling his entourage to stay back. I require 2 minutes, Wexler said. Off the record. The room needs to be cleared. My board bristled. Marcus started to stand up to object. This was highly irregular. You do not clear a board meeting in the first 30 seconds. It was a power move. It was a provocation. That is not protocol, Marcus said, his voice deep and warning. Wexler didn't look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on me. 2 minutes. Just you and me, and your counsel. He nodded towards Stewart. It was a test. He wanted to see if I would fold. He wanted to see if I was Douglas Mercer's daughter, eager to please, desperate for validation, or if I was the CEO of Kestrel Harbor. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Sarah. It is all right, I said calmly. Give us the room. Riley, Sarah warned. We should be present. I said give us the room, I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. If Mr. Wexler feels that our introduction requires privacy, I am happy to accommodate him. The clock starts now. I sat back down, crossing my legs, my face impassive. One by one, the board members gathered their papers and filed out. Wexler's team looked confused, but they retreated into the hallway as well. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut. It was just the three of us, me, Stewart, and the man my father thought was his best friend. Wexler pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down. He didn't open his binder. He placed his hands flat on the polished wood. You are Douglas Mercer's daughter, he said. It wasn't a question anymore. It was an accusation. I am, I replied, not blinking. He told me his daughter worked in tech support, Wexler said, his voice laced with a cold, sharp anger. He told me she was inconsequential. He believes that is true, I said. Wexler let out a short, incredulous breath. He looked around the room, at the empire I had built, at the view of the city I protected. He lied, Wexler said. Technically, Stewart spoke up for the first time, his voice dry and legalistic. He stated an opinion. His opinion is that his daughter is inconsequential. The market, however, seems to disagree. Wexler looked at Stewart, then back to me. A strange expression crossed his face. It wasn't fear, it was respect. The kind of respect a predator has for another predator who has been hiding in the tall grass. Does he know? Wexler asked. Does he know I am here? Does he know you are the counterparty to this deal? No, I said. Wexler leaned back in his chair. This complicates things. Only if you let it, I said. We are here to discuss the acquisition of Kestrel Harbor Systems. My lineage is irrelevant to the code base, unless, of course, your due diligence included a personality test for my father. Wexler stared at me for a long moment. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Open the doors, Wexler said. Get everyone back in here. He reached for his binder and flipped it open. We have a lot to talk about, Ms. Herrera. I pressed the intercom button. Send them back in. The game had officially begun, and Douglas Mercer wasn't even on the board. The heavy mahogany doors swung open, and the oxygen rushed back into the room along with my board of directors. They filed in with hesitant glances, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure but unable to locate the source. My executive assistant. A young woman named Emily, who could organize a hostile takeover if I asked her to, poured fresh water into the crystal tumblers with steady hands. We took our seats. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with the weight of the unspoken conversation that had just occurred between Calvin Wexler and me. Wexler did not open his portfolio immediately. He sat back, tenting his fingers, his eyes tracking me with a renewed clinical curiosity. He was no longer looking at a potential acquisition target. He was looking at a puzzle that he felt compelled to solve before he bought the box. Before we proceed to the valuation, Wexler said, his voice dominating the acoustic space of the room, I have one question that remains from our sidebar, a personal curiosity that impacts my assessment of the management team. My board stiffened. Marcus, the former admiral, narrowed his eyes. Go ahead, I said, keeping my posture rigid. How is it possible, Wexler asked, speaking slowly, that Douglas Mercer, a man who has spent the last month pitching me on the importance of legacy and family capability, has absolutely no idea that his daughter built this? He gestured to the room, to the screens displaying our network architecture, to the city skyline beyond the glass. I pride myself on reading people, Ms. Herrera. Your father presents himself as a patriarch who knows every corner of his empire. Yet, he missed the castle sitting in his own backyard. I felt the eyes of my entire board on me. They knew I didn't talk about my family. They respected my privacy. But this was different. This was a billionaire questioning my transparency. I didn't look down. I didn't fidget. I met Wexler's gaze with a calmness that cost me every ounce of my energy. My father deals in facades. Mr. Wexler, I said. He is a developer. He looks at an empty lot and sells a vision of what it could be. I am an engineer. I look at the structural integrity of the foundation. Those are two very different languages. He never knew about Kestrel Harbor because he never asked the right question. And what is the right question? Wexler asked. He asks, how does this make us look? I replied softly. He never asked. How does this work? Wexler held my gaze for 3 seconds, an eternity in a negotiation, and then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He understood. He categorized the data point, family dynamic estranged, competence verified. Very well, Wexler said, turning to the man on his right. Lawrence, run the numbers. Lawrence, Wexler's CFO, was a man who looked like he had been born wearing a tie. He slid a thick document across the table. It was bound in navy blue leather. The offer, Obsidian Ventures, acting as the primary acquisition vehicle for Wexler Capital, is prepared to offer a strategic investment of $120 million, Lawrence said, his tone dry as dust. This will be a cash and stock split. In exchange, we require a 51% controlling interest and the restructuring of the executive board to align with our global compliance standards. The number hung in the air. $120 million. It was significantly higher than our internal valuation. It was a godfather offer, an offer you were not supposed to refuse. My board members exchanged looks. I could see the dollar signs reflecting in the eyes of the venture capitalists. It was a magnificent exit strategy for them, but I heard the trap snap shut in the second half of the sentence. 51%, restructuring. It is a generous valuation, I said, not touching the document. But the structure is unacceptable. Lawrence blinked, clearly unused to being interrupted. Excuse me. You are asking for 51%, I said, leaning forward. That gives you operational control. You want to integrate our protocols into your global asset division. I have read your white papers. Lawrence, your standard procedure is to standardize security stacks across all subsidiaries to reduce overhead. It is the most efficient model, Lawrence argued. It is a suicide pact for this company, I countered. Kestrel Harbor protects critical infrastructure, water treatment, power grids, traffic control. These systems run on legacy code that is 30 years old, wrapped in our custom shielding. If you try to standardize it, if you try to force a one-size-fits-all corporate patch onto a municipal power plant, you will cause a cascade failure within 6 months. You are not buying a software company. Gentlemen, you are buying a bomb squad. And you do not tell the bomb squad which wire to cut to save money on copper. I slid the document back across the table. I will accept the valuation, I said, but Kestrel Harbor retains operational sovereignty. I remain CEO with veto power over technical integration, and the data stays siloed from your other real estate holdings. No cross-pollination. Lawrence looked at Wexler, flustered. Mr. Chairman, that defeats the purpose of the synergy. If we cannot control the asset is useless if it breaks, Stewart said. All eyes turned to Stewart. He had been silent until now, a shadow at my right hand. He adjusted his glasses and opened his folder. Article 4 of your own risk assessment charter, Stewart said, citing the document from memory. Wexler Capital prohibits investment in entities where technical integration poses a systemic risk to the parent company's reputation. Ms. Herrera is trying to save you from violating your own charter. If you take control and the grid goes down, that is on your head. If she retains control, the liability stays here. Wexler turned his head slowly to look at Stewart. He studied him, his eyes narrowing as he retrieved a memory file from years ago. "Mr. Blake," Wexler said, "I wondered when you would speak up." "Mr. Wexler," Stewart acknowledged with a polite nod. "You represented the opposition in the Farmco merger," Wexler said. "You found a regulatory loophole in the environmental impact statement that cost me 3 months of litigation." "It was 4 months," Stewart corrected gently. "And it wasn't a loophole. It was the law." The room went deadly silent. My board members looked terrified. You do not correct Calvin Wexler, but Wexler didn't explode. He didn't storm out. He smiled. It was a shark's smile. Cold, sharp, but undeniably respectful. "Competence surrounds competence," Wexler murmured, looking between me and Stewart. "I see why you two are married." He turned back to Lawrence. "Scrap the 51% requirement. We will take 49, minority stake. But with a supervoting seat on the board regarding financial matters, Ms. Herrera keeps operational control. Draft the addendum." Lawrence looked like he had swallowed a lemon, but he started typing furiously. "However," Wexler said, leaning forward, his voice dropping an octave, "there is the matter of the external variable." "My father," I said. "Douglas Mercer," Wexler clarified. "If we proceed with this deal, Kestrel Harbor becomes part of the Wexler ecosystem. Your father is currently soliciting investment for his Emerald Heights project based largely on his perceived proximity to me. Now that I am investing in his daughter's company, the market will assume a deeper alliance. It creates a conflict of interest narrative that I find distasteful." "There is no conflict," Marcus, my board member, spoke up, trying to be helpful. "We can have Riley sign a recusals document regarding any Mercer real estate projects. It is not about the paperwork." "Admiral," Wexler snapped, not looking at him. "It is about the perception. Douglas Mercer is a man who trades on perception." Wexler looked at me. "I need to know, Ms. Herrera, is your father a liability I need to insure against?" "He has no influence here," I said firmly. "He has never stepped foot in this office. He does not own a single share. The separation is absolute." "Is it?" Wexler asked. "Because let me be candid with you. I did not agree to fund his condo project because the numbers were good. They were mediocre at best. I agreed to a preliminary review because I was testing the water in this region. I used him as a thermometer." I felt a chill run down my spine. "He failed the test," Wexler continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "Not because of his business plan, but because of his discretion. In the last 48 hours, my intelligence team reports that he has told 3 different investment groups that I am a co-founder of his new venture. He is leveraging a handshake into a partnership. He is inflating the balloon." I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. It was worse than I thought. Douglas wasn't just exaggerating. He was lying to other investors. He was using Wexler's name as collateral he didn't possess. "If this deal goes through," Wexler said, "I will require a mechanism to protect my brand. I want a seat on your board, Ms. Herrera. And my first motion will be to implement a strict code of corporate ethics that extends to familial associations. If Douglas Mercer uses Kestrel Harbor or my name to solicit funds fraudulently, we cut him off, publicly, legally." He was asking me to sign the warrant. He was asking me to agree, in writing, that I would prioritize the company over my father. I looked at Stewart. His face was grim, but he gave a small nod. He knew the law. He knew what Douglas was doing was bordering on securities fraud. "I agree," I said, my voice steady. "If any individual, family or otherwise, misrepresents their relationship with this company or its shareholders, we will issue a formal cease and desist. The truth is the only currency I accept here, Mr. Wexler. Wexler nodded. Good. Then we have a framework. The tension in the room broke. The deal was essentially done. We had survived the initial collision. Lawrence was printing out the term sheet. The board members were smiling, already calculating their bonuses. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. Then, the door to the boardroom opened again. It wasn't a server with more water. It was my personal secretary, Emily. She looked pale. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held a folded piece of paper. She never interrupted a board meeting. Never. Ms. Herrera, she whispered, walking quickly to the head of the table. I am so sorry, but this just came in through the whistleblower hotline. The legal team said you needed to see it immediately. Before you sign anything, she placed the note in front of me. I unfolded the paper. It was a printout of an email chain. I read the first 3 lines, and the blood drained from my face. It was a tip from a compliance officer at a mid-sized pension fund. They were conducting a background check on a pitch they had received yesterday. Subject verification of assets / Mercer Real Estate message, Mr. Douglas Mercer has submitted a prospectus for the Emerald Heights development. In the liquidity proof, he lists proprietary technology assets valued at $40 million, explicitly naming Kestrel Harbor Systems as a guaranteed subsidiary collateral for the loan. He claims to have power of attorney over the CEO. I stared at the words. He hadn't just used Wexler's name. He had used mine. He had listed my company, my life's work, the entity I had fought to keep separate from him for 15 years, as collateral for his construction loan. He had told a pension fund that he owned me. Riley? Stewart asked. Seeing my expression, I couldn't speak. I slid the paper to Stewart. He read it, and his jaw locked tight. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fury and sorrow. It was the look of a man who knew that the time for diplomacy had ended. Is there a problem? Wexler asked. His radar for disaster was twitching. I looked up at the billionaire. I looked at the man who had just demanded ethical separation. Mr. Wexler, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Cold, distant, like it was coming from a machine. You asked if my father was a liability. I placed my hand on the paper, covering the lie Douglas had told. It appears, I said, that he has just become a legal target. I stood up. We need to suspend the signing for 1 hour, I declared. My general counsel and I have a family matter to deconstruct, and by deconstruct, I mean dismantle. Wexler looked at the paper under my hand, then at my face. He saw the shift. He saw the daughter die and the CEO take full possession of the body. Take your time, Wexler said softly. I will wait. The hour that followed was not spent in negotiation. It was spent in forensic reconstruction. We had retreated to the secure data annex adjacent to the boardroom, a windowless space designed for reviewing sensitive code, but now it felt like a bunker. The air conditioning hummed with a low, aggressive drone, recycling the tension in the room. I sat at the terminal, my fingers flying across the keyboard, while Stewart paced behind me, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the clipped, rapid-fire dialect of crisis management. No, Stewart said into the phone. I want the raw metadata from the whistleblower's file. I need to know when that PDF was created and who the author was. Yes, I will hold. On my screen. The evidence was expanding like a malignant tumor. The compliance team had successfully decrypted the attachment from the anonymous tip. It was a pitch deck, a presentation document titled The Mercer-Wexler Alliance Phase 2. It was glossy, it was professionally designed, and every single page was a fabrication that bordered on criminal insanity. I scrolled to slide 4. There was a photo of Douglas, smiling confidently, and next to him, a photo of Calvin Wexler. The text beneath Wexler's name read, Strategic Co-Founder, Principal Investor. That was a lie. Wexler was neither. But slide 7 was the one that made my blood run cold. It was a structural organizational chart. At the top was Mercer Real Estate, and directly beneath it, connected by a solid line indicating ownership, was Kestrel Harbor Systems. The caption read, "Proprietary Technology Subsidiary, 100% control retained by the Mercer Family Trust." "He sold me," I whispered, the realization settling in my gut like a stone. He didn't just use my name, Stewart. He listed my company as his asset. He is telling these pension funds that he owns Kestrel Harbor. Stewart lowered his phone, his face pale. "If he used that deck to solicit money across state lines, that is wire fraud. Riley, if he sent it to a bank, it is bank fraud. And since he is implicating a company that works on national infrastructure, he is inviting the Department of Justice to kick down his front door." "He thinks he is just marketing," I said, staring at the screen. "He thinks he is painting a picture of future success. He does not understand that in the world of finance. A projection is different from a statement of fact." "The contagion risk is real," Stewart warned, leaning over the desk. "If this gets out before we announce our deal with Wexler, the market will think Wexler is part of the scam, or worse, they will think Kestrel is actually insolvent and Douglas is trying to prop it up. It could kill the acquisition. Riley, Wexler will not touch a company that is being investigated for securities fraud." I looked at the phone on the desk. The instinct to save him flared up, a reflex ingrained from childhood. Call him, scream at him, tell him to shred the documents and retract the emails. Tell him to stop before he walks off the cliff. I reached for the device. My thumb hovered over the contact Dad. But then, the memory of his voice from the morning hit me. "Stop playing with computers. Learn how real business is done." If I called him now, what would he say? He would tell me I was overreacting. He would say I didn't understand how to sell the dream. He would accuse me of being jealous of his success with Wexler. He would never listen to the technicality of the law until the handcuffs were actually clicking shut. I pulled my hand back. "No," I said. "If I warn him, he will try to cover it up, and he is sloppy. He will make it worse. We need to contain this from our end first." My phone pinged. A notification slid onto the screen. It was an email from Douglas. Subject: Victory Dinner. Save the date. I opened it. It was a digital invitation to a private dining room at the city's most expensive steakhouse for Friday night. The guest list included the mayor, 3 bank presidents, and the Wexler team. The body of the email was brief and patronizing, Riley. "I managed to squeeze 2 seats in for you and Stewart. Try to be on time. And please, let us keep the conversation light. No talk about servers or hacking. We want to celebrate the future, not bore people with the plumbing. Love, Dad." "He is inviting the Wexler team," Stewart noted, reading over my shoulder. "He thinks they are coming to celebrate him. He has no idea that the only reason Wexler's in town is to buy me," I said. Another vibration. This time, a text message from Madeline. "Hey sis, Dad is on a rampage about this dinner. Just a heads up. He told the country club board this morning that you are personally designing the smart grid for Emerald Heights. Apparently, you are going to install voice-activated security for free. He promised them a demo next week. Just play along if anyone asks." "Okay, it makes him look good." I stared at the text. Play along. He was selling my labor now. He was promising my technology, my staff, and my intellectual property to his friends as if I were a contractor he could dispatch with a snap of his fingers. He wasn't just stealing my reputation, he was stealing my work. "He promised a demo," I said, my voice hardening. "He is writing checks with my hands." "Riley," Stewart said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Look at the network logs." He pointed to the second monitor, where our internal security diagnostics were running. I had set up a perimeter watch the moment the whistleblower tip came in. There was a blip, a small, rhythmic pulse on the external firewall. "Is that a penetration attempt?" Stewart asked. "No," I said, my eyes narrowing as I interpreted the data. "It is not a hack. It is a credentialed login. Someone is accessing the investor portal using a guest pass." I traced the IP address. It wasn't coming from Russia or China. It was coming from a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Mercer real estate offices. "Who has a guest pass?" I asked. We gave limited access to the due diligence teams, Stewart said. And wait, 2 years ago, you gave Douglas a family access link to the public PR folder so he could see your press photos. Remember he wanted to show off your headshot to his golf buddies? I typed furiously, isolating the user session. The account being used was indeed Mercer_family_guest, but they weren't looking at press photos. They were trying to access the active negotiations folder. He is trying to read the deal memos, I said. Why would he do that? It is not him, Stewart said. Douglas types with 2 fingers. Look at the request speed. This person is scraping data. They are downloading file names. Stewart grabbed his laptop and ran a trace on the device ID associated with the login. He was the best lawyer in the city, but before that, he had been a prosecutor. He knew how to find people. The device is registered to a Prestige Media Consulting, Stewart read. Owner Fletcher Davis. I knew that name. Fletcher Davis was a bottom feeder. He was a PR fixer who worked for the desperate and the vain. He sold stories to tabloids and business gossip columns. Douglas hired a fixer, I realized. Why? Because he is scared, Stewart said. Or because he is trying to control the narrative. If Fletcher Davis is in our system, he is looking for proof of the Wexler connection so he can leak it. Douglas wants the news out there before the ink is dry. He wants to force Wexler's hand by making the partnership public knowledge. He is trying to leak my deal to boost his stock, I said. It was corporate espionage. My own father had hired a mercenary to spy on his daughter's company so he could pump and dump his own real estate prowess. If that information leaks to the press before we sign, Stewart said, the SEC halts everything. We get frozen for insider trading investigation. The deal dies. Kestrel dies. I sat back, the cold anger crystallizing into a diamond-hard resolve. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. This was an act of war. Cut the access, I ordered. Stewart tapped a key. The connection was severed. Fletcher Davis was locked out. Do we call the police? Stewart asked. No, I said. Not yet. If we arrest his fixer, Douglas finds out we know. He will panic. He will destroy the pitch decks. He will wipe his servers. We need that evidence intact. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. I picked up a red marker. We need a firewall, I said. Not digital, legal. What are you thinking? We draft the press release, I said. The real one. The one that announces the acquisition of Kestrel Harbor by Wexler Capital. We set the narrative in stone. We detail the terms. We explicitly state that Kestrel is an independent entity with no other liabilities. And the Mercer connection, Stewart asked. We prepare a secondary document, I said. A disclaimer, a formal statement from Wexler Capital, denying any partnership with Mercer Real Estate. We keep it in the chamber. You are going to blindside him, Stewart said. Riley, if we release this on our terms, his investors will see it. They will see that Wexler bought you, not him. They will ask questions. His house of cards will collapse instantly. He built the house, I said. I'm just turning on the lights. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Tuesday. The victory dinner was Friday. We signed the deal today, I said, but we embargo the announcement. Until when? Until Friday morning, I said. Let him have 3 more days of fantasy. Let him send out his invites. Let him promise the moon to his friends. And then, when the markets open on Friday, the truth comes out. The notification will hit every Bloomberg terminal in the world, including the ones on the phones of the bankers attending his dinner. Stewart looked at me with a mixture of awe and concern. That is going to be a very quiet dinner. It is going to be a very honest dinner, I corrected. I smoothed the front of my suit. Let us go back to the boardroom. Mr. Wexler is waiting, and I think I am ready to accept his condition about the board seat. In fact, I am going to insist on it. Why? Because, I said, opening the door. When Douglas Mercer falls, I want to make sure he falls away from this company, and having a billionaire shark on my board is the best shark cage I can buy. We walked back into the hallway. The silence of the office felt different now. It wasn't the silence of anticipation, it was the silence of a fuse burning down. My father had started a countdown he didn't even know existed, and at the end of it, only one Mercer was going to be left standing. Friday morning arrived not with a sunrise, but with a server update. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time, the embargo lifted. The press release went live on the Kestrel Harbor Systems investor portal, and simultaneously, it hit the business wire. The headline was stark, professional, and completely devastating to the narrative my father had spent a lifetime constructing. Kestrel Harbor Systems announces strategic partnership with Wexler Capital, $120 million investment to fortify national critical infrastructure. There was no mention of Mercer Real Estate. There was no mention of Emerald Heights. There was no quote from Douglas Mercer. The subheading simply read, "Under the continued leadership of CEO Riley Herrera, Kestrel Harbor remains an independent operational entity." I sat at my desk, my hands folded on top of the mahogany surface, watching the world wake up. For the first 30 seconds, there was silence. It was the digital breath intake of the market processing the data. Then, the world exploded. My 3 monitors turned into a kaleidoscope of notifications. LinkedIn requests flooded in by the hundreds. The stock ticker for the sector jumped 2 points. My email inbox began to auto-scroll so fast the subject lines were unreadable. The landline on my desk, a phone that rarely rang, began to trill with a shrill, insistent demand. "CNBC is on line 1. Emily, my assistant, said through the intercom. Her voice was trembling slightly. "Bloomberg is on line 2, and your mother is on line 3. I looked at the blinking red light of line 3. "Tell CNBC, I will release a statement at 10 o'clock, I said, my voice steady. "Send Bloomberg to Stewart and put line 3 through." I picked up the receiver. "Riley, it wasn't my mother, it was Madeline." Her voice was high, thin, and laced with a panic I had never heard before. Madeline was trained to handle social gaffes, spilled wine, or a rain-delayed garden party. She was not trained for a tectonic shift in power dynamics. "Hi, Madeline," I said. "What is happening?" she asked. "My phone is blowing up. Todd just called me from the hospital. He saw it on the news in the break room. He said you sold the company to Calvin Wexler, the billionaire." "I didn't sell it," I corrected calmly. "It is a strategic partnership. I still run it. But Dad..." She trailed off, her voice cracking. "Dad told everyone at the club last night that he was bringing Wexler in. He told them he was the bridge. He sent out invites for a victory dinner tonight. Riley. He ordered cases of vintage champagne." "I know," I said. "Did you know," she whispered, "did you know you were going to do this while he was bragging about it? I have been negotiating this for 6 months. Madeline." There was a scuffle on the other end of the line, the sound of a phone being snatched away. Then, my mother's voice pierced my ear. It was not the warm, sugary tone she used for her charity committee. It was the voice of the enforcer. "You lied to us," Elaine Mercer hissed. "I never lied, Mother," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I told you I ran a tech company. I told you I was busy. I told you business was good. You let us look like fools," she shouted. "Do you have any idea what is happening right now?" The phone has not stopped ringing. People are calling to congratulate Douglas, but they are confused. They are asking why your name is on the headline and his isn't. They are asking if he is retiring. They are asking if he works for you. "And what is he telling them?" I asked. "He is in the study with the door locked," Elaine said, her voice shaking with rage. "He is destroying things. Riley, I heard glass breaking. You did this. You humiliated him on purpose. You could have told us. You could have let him be part of the announcement. We are family." "I am the CEO of a publicly traded interest," I said, letting the title hang in the air between us. "My fiduciary duty is to my shareholders, not to Dad's social calendar. If I had told him, he would have leaked it. In fact, he tried to leak it anyway." "How dare you," she spat, "after everything he gave you. The education, the roof over your head. You are selfish. Riley, you have always been selfish. You think because you made some money you are better than us, you are just a... The line clicked. I didn't hang up. Douglas had picked up the extension in the study. Riley. His voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the booming baritone of the gala. It was a guttural, strangled sound. Hello, Dad? I said. Wexler called me, Douglas said. He sounded like he was in shock. 5 minutes ago. His secretary called me. They canceled. Canceled what? The Emerald Heights Review, he whispered. They said that given the significant capital outlay for the Kestrel Harbor acquisition, Wexler Capital is consolidating its regional exposure. They are pulling the term sheet for my condos. Riley, they dropped me. I closed my eyes. I knew that was coming. Wexler didn't need the bait anymore. He had caught the prize. I am sorry to hear that, I said. You knew? He rasped. You sat there on the phone with me yesterday morning. I told you to learn from him. I told you to watch how real business is done. And you were laughing at me. I wasn't laughing, I said. I was working. He asked me, Douglas said, his voice rising, hysteria creeping in. On the phone just now, he asked me, Mr. Mercer, did you not read your daughter's quarterly reports? He treated me like I was an idiot, like I was a joke. He thinks I am a joke because I didn't know who you were. Maybe you should have asked, I said. How do I look? Riley, he screamed, the sound distorting the speaker. How do I look to the board at the club? I promised them a partnership. I promised them a connection to Wexler. Now I look like a liar. I look like a fraud who rides his daughter's coattails. You are not riding my coattails, Dad, I said coldly, because I never let you on the train. He slammed the phone down so hard it hurt my ear. I placed the receiver back in the cradle. My hand was trembling. Just a little. I clasped my hands together to stop it. Riley, Stuart was standing in the doorway. He held a tablet in his hand. His face was grim. You need to see this, he said. Is it the stock price? No, he said. It is the backlash. The narrative is shifting. He walked over and placed the tablet in front of me. It was an article from a popular, aggressive financial gossip site, the kind that prioritized clicks over journalistic integrity. The headline read, Daddy's Little Deal. Did Riley Herrera use family connections to land the Wexler whale? I felt the blood drain from my face. What is this? Read the second paragraph, Stuart said. I read it aloud, my voice flat. While Riley Herrera claims to be a self-made tech mogul, sources close to the Mercer family suggest a different story. Insiders report that her father, real estate developer Douglas Mercer, has been greasing the wheels with Calvin Wexler for months. Is this a strategic acquisition, or is it just a billionaire doing a favor for a golf buddy to give his daughter a payday? Nepotism, I whispered. They are calling it nepotism. It was the one thing I had spent 16 years running from, the one label I had changed my name to avoid. It is trending, Stuart said. Twitter is eating it up. Daddy Did It is starting to circulate. They are dismissing your patents, your contracts, the entire infrastructure we built. They are reducing you to a nepo baby in a suit. Who is the source? I demanded, standing up. Who is the insider? I am tracing it now, Stuart said. But the damage is happening in real time. The stock price just dipped. Investors hate nepotism. It implies incompetence. I looked at the screen. The comments were vicious. Another rich girl playing CEO. Must be nice to have Daddy make the intro. I felt a surge of nausea, followed immediately by a blaze of fury. My father had not only failed to support me, his desperate flailing was now dragging me down into the mud with him. Set up the camera, I said. The press conference, Stuart asked. No press, I said. Investors only, open invite, stream it live. I am going to kill this narrative right now. 20 minutes later, I stood at the podium in the briefing room. The red light of the camera blinked on. The viewer count on the monitor climbed rapidly. 500, 2,000, 10,000. I looked directly into the lens. I did not use a teleprompter. "My name is Riley Herrera," I began, my voice projecting with the force of a hammer strike. "There is a story circulating that the acquisition announced today was the result of familial influence. That is a lie." I clicked a remote. The screen behind me lit up with a timeline. "This is the date Kestrel Harbor Systems filed for incorporation," I said, pointing to a date 16 years ago. I was 18. My startup capital was $5,000 from a student loan. My office was a basement. I clicked again. "This is the date Douglas Mercer met Calvin Wexler," I said. 3 weeks ago, at a gala I did not attend. I turned back to the camera. "I built this company while my family was telling me to quit. I secured contracts with the Department of Defense while my father was telling me to find a husband. The technology that protects this city's power grid was written by my team, on my servers, without a single introduction, dollar, or handshake from Douglas Mercer." I paused, leaning into the podium. "Mr. Wexler did not buy this company as a favor," I said. "He bought it because we are the only ones who can stop the lights from going out. If anyone doubts the validity of this deal, check the code. The code does not care who your father is, and neither do I." I walked off the stage. The stream cut. In the hallway, the board of directors was waiting. Marcus, the admiral, was the first to step forward. He looked at me with a solemn pride. "Well done, Riley," he said. "The stock just rebounded. It is up 4 points. "The truth plays well," Sarah added. "You crushed it." But Stuart was not smiling. He was standing by the window. Looking at his phone, he waved me over. "I found the leak," he said quietly. "Who was it?" I asked. "Who planted the nepotism story?" "It was Fletcher Davis," Stuart said. "The fixer Douglas hired." "My father paid him to smear me," I asked, feeling a fresh wave of horror. "No," Stuart said. "It is worse. Douglas paid him to create buzz. He wanted to leak the connection between him and Wexler to boost his own profile. He told Fletcher to pitch a story about the Mercer-Wexler alliance. But Fletcher is a tabloid hack. He spun it. He took Douglas's brag, that he was the bridge, and twisted it into the daddy's deal angle because it sells more papers. I almost didn't open it. I expected an apology. I expected a plea for help. I expected him to ask me to fix the mess he had made with the press. I opened the message. There were no emojis, no love, Dad. Just one sentence, cold and sharp as a knife. "You have destroyed everything I built." I stared at the screen. Even now, in the ruins of his own making, he was the victim. He truly believed that my success was an act of aggression against him. He couldn't see that he had built his house on sand. He only saw that I had refused to be the pillar holding it up. "Riley," Stuart asked. "What did he say?" I looked at the message one last time. "Nothing," I said. "He said absolutely nothing." I locked the phone screen. I didn't reply. There was no response to a man who looked at a skyscraper and blamed it for casting a shadow. "Let us go to lunch," I said to Stuart. "I believe we have a victory to celebrate." "And the dinner tonight?" Stuart asked. "The one at the steakhouse." "I imagine there will be a lot of empty seats," I said. "But that is not my problem. My calendar is clear." We walked toward the elevator. The office was buzzing with the energy of a company that had just leveled up. The phones were still ringing. But now, the tone was different. It was the sound of respect. I had destroyed nothing. I had simply revealed the world as it was, and for the first time in 34 years. I walked without looking back. The buzzer to my penthouse apartment rang at 7 o'clock on Friday evening. It was a sound I rarely heard. My building, a glass needle piercing the skyline of the financial district, had a doorman who filtered out the noise of the world. If the buzzer rang, it meant someone had bypassed the first layer of security. I checked the monitor. It was Madeline. She was standing in the lobby, looking small against the gray marble walls. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly at the waist, and her hair, usually a perfect cascade of salon-curated waves, looked windblown. She wasn't carrying a purse, just clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Let her up," I told the concierge. I opened the door before she knocked. Madeline stepped into the foyer and stopped dead. She didn't say hello. She didn't rush to hug me. She just stared. My apartment was not like our parents' house. There were no chintz sofas, no cabinets filled with porcelain figurines, no heavy velvet drapes trying to mimic a Victorian manor. It was open, airy, and aggressively modern. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in a way that made the buildings look like circuitry. The furniture was low and Italian, leather and chrome. It smelled of sandalwood and silence. "You live here?" Madeline asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For 3 years," I said, closing the door behind her. "I didn't know," she said. She walked slowly into the living room, her eyes scanning the art on the walls. Original pieces, not prints. She looked at the view. "I mean, I knew the address. I sent Christmas cards here, but I never pictured this." "You never asked to come over," I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact. "I know," she said. She turned to face me, and I saw the exhaustion etched into her features. The perfectly applied foundation was cracking around her eyes. "Mom always said you lived in a bachelorette pad near work. She made it sound like a dormitory. She said you were saving money." "I was saving money," I said. "I just had more of it to save than she thought." I gestured to the sofa. "Do you want a drink, tea, wine?" "Wine," she said. "Please, something strong." I poured 2 glasses of a vintage Pinot Noir and handed one to her. She took it with both hands, as if she needed the warmth. She sat on the edge of the sofa, knees pressed together, posture perfect even in distress. "The training ran deep. They are destroying each other over there," Madeline said, staring into the dark red liquid. "Dad is in the study drinking scotch and staring at the wall. Mom is on the phone with every socialite in the tri-state area, trying to spin this as a misunderstanding. It is a slaughterhouse. Riley." "I can imagine," I said. Taking a sip of my wine, I remained standing, leaning against the kitchen island. This was my territory. I didn't feel the need to make her comfortable by sitting down. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked up, her eyes wet. "Not Mom and Dad. Me. I'm your sister. Why did you let me think you were struggling? I sent you a gift card to Target for your birthday last year because I thought you needed groceries. Do you know how stupid I feel right now?" "I tried, Maddie," I said softly. "No, you didn't," she argued weakly. "You just sat there at dinners and nodded." "Christmas, 4 years ago," I said. "I had just signed the contract with the Port Authority. I started to tell you about the encryption protocols we were developing. I was excited. I got 3 sentences in, and you interrupted me to ask if I thought the shade of cream on the napkins clashed with the tablecloth." Madeline blinked. "Thanksgiving, 2 years ago." I continued, ticking the memories off like items on a receipt. I had just been named to the Under 40 list in Tech Weekly. I brought the magazine to show you. You looked at the cover, saw a woman in a hoodie, and asked if I needed to borrow a dress for the club formal. You didn't even open the magazine. Madeline looked down at her lap. "It happened dozens of times," I said. "Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to let you believe I was the charity case than to force you to see me as a peer." "I thought you were okay with it," she whispered. "Mom always said, 'Riley is happy in her little world.' I believed her. I never realized that by believing her, I was helping her silence you." "It is done now," I said. "The silence is over." "Is it?" Madeline asked. She took a large gulp of wine. "Because Dad is spinning a new story. He is telling Mom that you did this out of spite, that you set him up. He says you knew he was talking to Wexler and you waited until the last second to pull the rug out just to humiliate him. He can believe what he wants," I said. "But he is wrong." "I know he is wrong," Madeline said. She looked at me, and her expression shifted. The sadness was replaced by a sharp, painful clarity. "But there is something you do not know, something he told me a few months ago, when he first started chasing Wexler." I tensed. "What?" He knew you weren't just tech support, Madeline said. The air in the room went still. What do you mean? I asked. He knew Kestrel Harbor was doing well, she said. Maybe not this well, but he knew you were the CEO. He saw your name on a business brief a year ago. Then why, I asked, my voice rising, why did he treat me like I was invisible? Why did he tell people I fixed computers? Because he needed the lane to be clear, Madeline said, her voice shaking. He told me, if investors know Riley is the real deal, they will wonder why I am not partnering with her. They will wonder why the father is selling condos while the daughter is securing the power grid. It makes me look obsolete. So, he had to make you small. He had to make you a non-entity. That way, when he pitched himself to Wexler, he was the only Mercer that mattered. I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just old-fashioned sexism. It was a tactical strike. My father had actively suppressed my identity to protect his own fragile ego. He had buried his daughter to build a platform for himself. He sacrificed me, I said, to clear his view. Yes, Madeline said. And now that you are the giant, he looks like an ant, and he hates you for it. Before I could respond, Madeline's phone began to ring. It was sitting on the coffee table, the screen lit up with the name Mother. Madeline stared at it like it was a bomb. Answer it, I said. Put it on speaker. Madeline tapped the screen with a trembling finger. Madeline, Elaine's voice shrieked into the quiet elegance of my apartment. Where are you? You have been gone for 2 hours. The dinner reservations are canceled, but the vice president of the bank is calling the house line, and your father is refusing to speak to him. I am at Riley's, Madeline said. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. You are where? Elaine asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. I am at Riley's apartment, Madeline repeated. Good, Elaine snapped. You tell her to fix this, right now. You tell her to pick up the phone and call Calvin Wexler. She needs to tell him that this was all a misunderstanding. She needs to tell him that Douglas is a silent partner in her company. She needs to reinstate his credibility. Madeline, put her in her place. Remind her who paid for her braces. Remind her that without this family, she is nothing. I looked at Madeline. She was pale, her eyes wide with shame. She was hearing it for the first time, really hearing it, the toxicity, the manipulation, the absolute lack of love. Mom, Madeline said, her voice breaking. She isn't going to do that. Then you make her, Elaine screamed. You are the sister guilt her cry if you have to. Do not come home until she agrees to issue a retraction. Do you hear me? We are drowning here. Madeline reached out and ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. She wants me to lie to a billionaire to save Dad's ego, I said flatly. She wants me to commit securities fraud to save his reputation. She is terrified, Madeline said, putting her face in her hands. But that was awful. I am so sorry. Riley? You don't have to be sorry, Stuart said. He walked into the room from the hallway leading to the master bedroom. He was holding a file folder. He had been listening. He walked over to the coffee table and placed the folder in front of Madeline. You need to see this, Stuart said, because you need to understand that this is no longer a family squabble. This is a crime scene. Madeline looked up at him, confused. She opened the folder. Inside were the printouts of the pitch deck Douglas had sent to the pension funds, the slide claiming 100% control retained by the Mercer Family Trust. What is this? Madeline asked. That is the presentation Dad sent to investors, I said. He claimed he owned my company. He claimed he controlled my assets. Madeline read the text. Her hand flew to her mouth. He said he owned Kestrel. He used Riley's company as collateral for his loans. Stuart said, he raised money based on a lie. That is fraud. Madeline, federal fraud. Madeline looked at the document, then at me. The color drained from her face completely. Oh my God, she whispered. the mortgage." "What mortgage?" I asked sharply. Madeline looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He didn't just take loans from investors. Riley, he leveraged the house. He leveraged the summer cottage. He even dipped into the trust fund that grandfather left for the grandchildren." "He emptied the trust?" I asked. "That money was supposed to be untouchable." "He bet it all," Madeline sobbed. "He was so sure Wexler was going to back him. He thought once the Wexler deal was signed, the property value of Emerald Heights would skyrocket, and he could pay everything back before anyone noticed. He put everything on black. Riley, and the wheel just landed on red." I sank onto the arm of the sofa. "He was insolvent. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was bankrupt. And he had dragged the entire family's financial future down with him. If the investors sued, which they would come for everything: the house, the cars, the status." "He is going to lose the house," Madeline said. Mom doesn't even know he mortgaged it. If she finds out." "She will find out," Stuart said. "When the bank sends the foreclosure notice," Madeline looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Riley, is there anything, can you help? I know you hate him. I know he deserves it. But Mom and me, we didn't sign those papers." I looked at my sister. I looked at the luxury that surrounded me, the safety I had built with my own hands. I had the money. I could write a check that would clear the mortgage. I could make a call to Wexler and ask for a grace period for my father. Maybe arrange a quiet settlement to keep him out of jail. I could save them, but saving them meant stepping back into the trap. It meant validating Elaine's demand to fix it. It meant teaching Douglas that no matter how hard he kicked me, I would always be his safety net. "If I pay his debts," I said slowly, "he will do it again. He will think he's invincible." "He is going to go to prison," Madeline whispered. "He is 62 years old. Riley." "He committed a felony," Stuart said, "and he tried to frame your sister for it." I looked out the window. The city lights were blurring in my vision. This was the hardest part of revenge, the collateral damage. I didn't want my mother on the street. I didn't want Madeline to lose her inheritance. But I couldn't set myself on fire to keep them warm anymore. "I can't bail him out, Maddie," I said. "Not this time." Madeline stared at me. She didn't argue. She just nodded, a slow, defeated movement. She understood. "But," I added, "I will ensure that you and Mom have a place to stay. I won't let you be homeless. But I will not give Douglas Mercer a single cent to cover his gambling losses." Madeline took a deep breath and wiped her face. "That is fair." The sound of the door buzzer rang again. It was jarring in the heavy silence of the room. "Are you expecting someone else?" Madeline asked. "No," I said. I walked to the monitor. It was a man in a uniform I didn't recognize. He wasn't food delivery. He held a flat, red cardboard envelope. "Priority Legal Courier." "Ms. Herrera," the voice crackled over the intercom. "I have a delivery for a Ms. Riley Herrera. It requires a signature." "Send him up," I said. A minute later, I opened the door. The courier handed me the electronic pad. I signed. He handed me the envelope. I tore the tab and pulled out the documents. It was a subpoena. United States Securities and Exchange Commission, in the matter of Mercer Real Estate Development Associated Entities. I scanned the page. It was a notice of formal investigation. They were freezing assets. They were demanding records. And there, at the bottom of the second page, was the list of persons of interest: Douglas Mercer, Elaine Mercer, Riley Herrera witness. They moved fast. The whistleblower tip must have triggered an automatic flag at the SEC. "What is it?" Stuart asked. Coming up behind me, I handed him the letter. "It has started," I said. "The government is involved." Madeline stood up, her trench coat falling around her like a shroud. "Is that for Dad?" "It is for all of us," I said. "But mostly for him." I looked at my sister. "You should go home, Madeline," I said gently. "You need to be there when this arrives at his door tomorrow morning. He is going to need a lawyer, a real one, not a golf buddy. Are you coming?" she asked. Will you be there? I shook my head. No, I said. I am a witness for the prosecution now. I can't be in the room. Madeline nodded. She walked to the door, then stopped. She looked back at me, the sister she had ignored, the titan she had underestimated. He really blew it, didn't he? She said. He bet against the wrong partner, I replied. She left. I closed the door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt felt final. The family was not just fractured, it was severed, and the law was coming to cauterize the wound. The location my father chose for our surrender negotiation was a high-end coffee shop on 4th Avenue. The kind of place where the baristas wore leather aprons and the espresso cost $7. It was neutral ground. It was public enough to prevent a scene, yet expensive enough to make him feel like he still commanded some level of dignity. He arrived 12 minutes late. It was a classic Douglas Mercer power move. Make them wait. Make them anxious. But as he walked through the glass doors, the performance fell apart. His suit, usually immaculate, looked slightly loose at the shoulders. His tie was knotted perfectly, but his eyes were darting around the room, scanning for people who might recognize him, people who might have read the headlines about his pending collapse. I was already seated at a corner table. Stuart was next to me. We had not ordered coffee. We were not there to socialize. Douglas approached the table. He didn't sit immediately. He stood there, waiting for me to stand up and hug him, to perform the ritual of the dutiful daughter greeting the patriarch. I remained seated. I gestured to the empty chair opposite me. Sit down, Dad, I said. He flinched at the tone. It was the voice I used for underperforming vendors, not fathers. He pulled out the chair and sat, placing his leather portfolio on the table as a shield. I am glad you came, he said. Clearing his throat, he tried to summon a smile, but it looked like a grimace. I thought, well, after the misunderstanding with the press release, I thought we needed to align our strategies. There is no strategy to align, I said. There is only the reality of the situation. Riley, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I need your help. The banks are calling. The investors for Emerald Heights are pulling out because of the rumors. You have to fix this with Wexler. Fix what? I asked. Tell him, Douglas said, leaning forward, his eyes desperate. Just get a meeting with him. Tell him that my project is solid. Tell him that the press got it wrong, that we are working together. If he publicly recommits to Emerald Heights, the panic stops. The SEC backs off. Everything goes back to normal. He was asking me to use my credibility to patch the hole in his sinking ship. He wanted me to cash in the chips I had earned over 16 years to buy him a reprieve. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had spent my entire life telling me I was inadequate because I didn't fit his social mold. Dad, I said quietly, I have a question for you. And depending on how you answer it, we will see if there is anything left to discuss. He blinked. What? Do you know what Kestrel Harbor Systems does? I asked. Douglas froze. What kind of question is that? Of course I know. Then tell me, I said. Be specific. Do not use the word computers or tech. Tell me exactly what the company you claim to own actually does. He opened his mouth. He looked at Stuart. He looked at the menu on the table. Well, he stammered, you do security, internet things. You help companies with their data. What kind of data? I pressed. Financial, he guessed, like banking software. We protect industrial control systems, I said, my voice void of emotion. We write the code that prevents hackers from overpressurizing natural gas pipelines and blowing up neighborhoods. We secure the water filtration systems so that sewage does not flow into the drinking supply. We do not do banking. We do not do internet things. We do critical infrastructure defense. The silence that followed was heavy. It stretched for 10 seconds. 7 years. For 7 years. My company had been growing, winning awards, saving cities, and my father had never bothered to learn the elevator pitch. He didn't know because he didn't care. To him, my work was just noise. It is technical, Douglas snapped. waving his hand dismissively, trying to recover. The details do not matter. Riley, what matters is that I told my investors you were involved. I promised them access. Access to what? Stewart asked. He spoke for the first time, his voice sharp as a razor. Douglas shifted in his seat. He looked cornered. I told them, Douglas said, avoiding my eyes, that Riley was designing a proprietary smart grid for the condo complex, exclusive technology, voice-activated security, energy efficiency algorithms that haven't been released to the public yet. I told them that because you are my daughter, Emerald Heights would be the most advanced residential block in the state. I stared at him. You sold them vaporware. You promised them technology that doesn't exist, using resources you do not control. I figured you could build it, Douglas shouted, causing a woman at the next table to look over. He lowered his voice. You are smart. You have a whole building full of geeks. I thought once the money came in, I would just ask you to whip something up. It is just a few sensors. Riley, why are you making this so difficult? Because that is fraud, Stewart said. Soliciting investment based on non-existent assets and unauthorized partnerships is a felony, and you did it in writing. Stewart reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file. He slid it across the table. It was the log of the data breach, the attempt by Fletcher Davis to hack our investor portal. And this, Stewart said, this is espionage. Douglas looked at the paper. He recognized Fletcher's name. His face turned a sickly shade of gray. I didn't tell him to hack you, Douglas muttered. I told him to find the connection. I told him to get proof that Wexler was talking to us. You paid a fixer to spy on your daughter, I said. You tried to leak my deal to the tabloids to pump your own stock. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is if that leak had happened before I signed? The SEC would have blocked my merger. You almost destroyed my company. Dad, to save your condo project. Douglas slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. I had to, he hissed. I had to do something. You were freezing me out. You were so cold. Riley, you have always been cold. You sit in your ivory tower with your husband and your secrets, and you let your family struggle. If you had just included me, if you had just given me a seat at the table, I wouldn't have had to go behind your back. This is your fault. You forced my hand because you are selfish. It was breathtaking. The narcissism was absolute. In his mind, my success was a withholding of affection. My boundaries were an act of aggression. My phone rang. It was lying face up on the table. Mom, I looked at Douglas. Did you tell her to call me? Answer it, he said. I tapped the speaker icon. Riley. Elaine's voice was high, frantic, dissolving into sobs. Riley, please, you have to stop this. The neighbor's Mrs. Vanderbilt just called me. She asked if the police were at the house. She saw a courier van. Riley, I cannot live like this. We are going to be pariahs. Mom, calm down, I said. We are family, she wailed. Family saves each other. I do not care who signed what. I do not care about the business. You have the money. Just write the check. Make it go away. Why are you punishing us? After all we did for you, we gave you everything. I listened to her cry. I waited for her to ask how I was. I waited for her to ask if I was okay after being accused of nepotism on national news. I waited for an apology for the years of neglect. There was nothing. Just fear. Fear of losing the country club membership. Fear of the sold sign on the lawn. I cannot fix this. Mom, I said. I am sorry you are hurting, but I cannot fix a federal investigation. You are ungrateful, she screamed. You are a cold, heartless. I hung up. I looked back at Douglas. He wasn't comforting her. He was watching me, gauging if her tears had worked. When he saw my expression, stone cold, unmoved, he realized the emotional leverage was gone, and then the mask slipped completely. The desperate father vanished. The loving patriarch vanished. What remained was a small, bitter man who realized he had lost. You think you are so special, Douglas said, his voice dripping with venom. You think because Wexler chose you, that makes you better than me. But let me tell you something, Riley. He almost didn't choose you. I narrowed my eyes. What are you talking about? 2 weeks ago, Douglas said, leaning back, a cruel smile touching his lips. When I found out he was meeting with you, I called him. I tried to warn him. Stuart stiffened beside me. Warn him about what? I told him you were unstable, Douglas said. I told him you were difficult to work with. I told him that Kestrel Harbor was a house of cards, that the tech was overrated. I felt the air leave my lungs. You tried to sabotage the deal. I offered him a trade, Douglas confessed. I told him, forget the girl. She is small potatoes. Put the money into Emerald Heights. I am the seasoned veteran. I am the partner you want. I told him that if he dropped you and signed with me, I would make sure he got a better return. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He hadn't just tried to ride my coattails. He had tried to cut the coat off my back. He had actively lobbied the billionaire to destroy his own daughter's career so he could get funding for a luxury apartment complex. Because you are my daughter, Douglas said, shrugging as if it were obvious. You are supposed to sacrifice for the legacy. I am the head of this family. The capital should have gone to me. I looked at Stuart. He looked ready to reach across the table and strangle him, but I placed a hand on Stuart's arm. I felt a strange sense of peace. It was the peace of absolute clarity. There were no more questions, no more, maybe he loves me in his own way. The truth was sitting there, ugly and naked. He viewed me as a resource to be consumed, and if I couldn't be consumed, I was to be discarded to reduce the competition. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I smoothed the front of my jacket. Where are you going? Douglas asked, panic flaring in his eyes again. We haven't settled this. You have to call him. I don't have to do anything, I said. Riley, he shouted, standing up. If I go down, I am dragging you with me. I will tell the press everything I will tell them. You will tell them what? I interrupted, my voice icy. That you tried to sabotage your own daughter, that you committed fraud. Go ahead, Dad. Hold a press conference. See who believes you now. I looked him in the eye. I am not going to sue you, I said. And I am not going to save you. I am going to do the one thing you never did for me. What is that? He asked. I am going to let you stand on your own merits. I said, you wanted to be a big businessman, Dad. You wanted to play in the big leagues. Well, this is it. In the big leagues, when you break the law, you go to prison, and when you bet the house and lose, you sleep on the street. You can't leave me like this, he whispered. I am your father. You were a donor, I said. And frankly, the investment didn't yield much of a return. I turned to Stuart. Let us go. We walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see him crumbling. I had a company to run. I had a board meeting to prepare for. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. I was Riley Herrera, and I was free. The closing meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning on Monday. The boardroom of Kestrel Harbor Systems had been transformed into a theater of corporate finality. The long walnut table was clear of clutter. Save for the leather-bound dossiers containing the final merger agreement, bottles of sparkling water and crystal glasses were arranged with geometric precision. The air smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. I sat at the head of the table. To my right was Stuart, my husband and general counsel. To my left were the senior partners from Obsidian Ventures and the legal team representing Wexler Capital. At 9:45, the double doors opened. Calvin Wexler walked in. He was early. In the world of high finance, arriving early was a statement. It meant you were controlling the clock. He did not look like a man who was about to sign a check for $120 million. He looked like a man who was about to conduct an execution. Ms. Herrera, Wexler said, bypassing the handshake. Before we uncap the pens, I am invoking the Risk Review Clause, paragraph 14, Section B. My board members exchanged nervous glances. The risk review clause was a break glass in case of emergency provision. It allowed the buyer to halt the deal seconds before signing if a new, catastrophic liability appeared. "What is the concern, Mr. Wexler?" I asked, keeping my hands folded on the table. "The concern," Wexler said, turning toward the glass wall that overlooked the lobby, "is currently screaming at your security guard downstairs." I looked out. Through the glass floor of the atrium, I could see a commotion in the lobby below. A man in a disheveled suit was shouting, waving a briefcase at the stone-faced security team. It was Douglas Mercer. He had come. "He claims to be my partner," Wexler said, his voice dry. "He claims he has a right to be present at the closing. He is threatening to call the press and claim that Kestrel Harbor is excluding a primary stakeholder." "He is not a stakeholder," Stewart said firmly. "He holds zero equity." "I know that," Wexler said. "But noise is expensive, Mr. Blake, and your father seems determined to be the loudest noise in the city today. He is desperate, and desperate men burn buildings down." I stood up. I walked to the intercom on the wall. "Security," I said. "This is Riley Herrera." "Ms. Herrera," the head of security replied, his voice tense. "We are about to remove the individual. He is causing a disturbance." "No," I said. "Let him up." The room went silent. Marcus, my board member, stood up. "Riley, you cannot be serious. You are letting him into the closing. He is toxic." "He is already toxic," I said, turning back to the table. "If we throw him out, he goes to the reporters waiting on the sidewalk and spins a story about how we silenced him. He becomes a martyr. I am not going to give him that stage." I looked at Wexler. "You wanted a risk review. We are going to do it live. Let him in. But I want everything on the record. Every word he says goes into the minutes. Every threat is transcribed." Wexler studied me for a long moment. Then he sat down. "Bring him in," Wexler said. 3 minutes later, the doors swung open. Douglas Mercer strode into the room. He was trying to project the image of the aggrieved patriarch, but the cracks were visible. His tie was crooked. There was sweat on his upper lip. He clutched his briefcase like a weapon. He saw Wexler first. His face lit up with a manic, terrifying hope. "Calvin," Douglas exclaimed, ignoring the security guard behind him. "Thank God. I knew you would not let them shut me out. We are partners, right? We need to oversee this together." Wexler did not smile. He did not stand. He simply watched Douglas with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a bacteria culture. "Mr. Mercer," I said, "take a seat." Douglas looked at me. His eyes narrowed. "You," he spat. "You tried to cut me out. You tried to steal my deal." "Sit down," I repeated, my voice cracking like a whip. Douglas sat. He looked around the table, seeing the lawyers, the documents, the money. He realized he was the only person in the room without a pen. "I am here to protect the family interest," Douglas announced, straightening his jacket. "I know what you are doing, Riley. You are selling the company for pennies to spite me. You are trying to erase my contribution." "What contribution?" Stewart asked, his pen poised over a legal pad. "Please be specific for the record." "The introduction," Douglas shouted. "I brought Wexler to the table. I cultivated the relationship. If it weren't for me, this company would still be a garage project. I am the catalyst, and I am demanding my finder's fee. I want 20% of the acquisition price, or I walk out of here and tell the Wall Street Journal that this entire merger is built on fraud." There it was, the blackmail. "You are threatening to sabotage the deal unless we pay you $24 million, I asked. "I am demanding what is fair," Douglas yelled. "I am the reason you are here. You owe me, you ungrateful, cold-hearted." "That is enough," Stewart interrupted. Stewart reached into his briefcase. He didn't pull out a legal brief. He pulled out a small black USB drive and a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Mercer," Stewart said calmly, "you claim that you are the architect of this deal. You claim that you are protecting the company's reputation. But we have evidence that suggests otherwise. Stewart slid the paper across the table to Wexler. Wexler picked it up. This, Stewart addressed the room, is a transcript of an email exchange between Douglas Mercer and Fletcher Davis, a freelance public relations consultant, dated last Thursday. Douglas went pale. In this email, Stewart continued, his voice devoid of mercy, Douglas Mercer instructs Mr. Davis to, quote, plant a story that suggests Riley is a figurehead and that the real deal is happening through Mercer Real Estate, he goes on to say. Make sure the press questions her competence. If she looks weak, Wexler will have to deal with me. The boardroom was deadly silent. You didn't just leak the story, I said, looking at my father. You orchestrated the smear campaign against me. You tried to destroy my reputation, the reputation of the company you claim to protect, just to force Mr. Wexler to negotiate with you. That is a lie, Douglas stammered, sweat dripping down his temple. That is fake. I never sent that. We have the metadata, Stewart said. And we have a sworn affidavit from Fletcher Davis. He flipped, Douglas. We told him he was looking at a conspiracy charge, and he gave us everything to save his own license. Douglas slumped in his chair. The air went out of him. The victim act had shattered. Calvin Wexler placed the paper down on the table. He stood up. He was a tall man, and in that moment, he looked like a giant. Mr. Mercer, Wexler said. His voice was quiet, deep, and terrifying. I have tolerated your phone calls. I have tolerated your gala invitations. I have even tolerated your desperate attempts to imply we are friends. But I do not tolerate sabotage. Wexler leaned forward, placing his knuckles on the walnut wood. I was never your partner, Wexler said. I never considered investing in Emerald Heights. I took the meeting because my analyst told me your daughter was a genius, and I wanted to see if the apple had fallen far from the tree. It turns out, the apple fell in a different orchard entirely. Douglas looked up, his eyes wide with shock. You were using me, Douglas whispered. I was vetting the liability, Wexler corrected. And you have proven to be a significant one. If you say one more word to the press, if you even whisper the name Kestrel Harbor again, I will not only sue you for tortious interference, I will hand this file to the district attorney. You are attempting extortion. Mr. Mercer, and unlike your daughter, I do not have a sentimental blind spot. Douglas looked at me. He looked for the safety net. He looked for the daughter who used to seek his approval. Riley, he pleaded, his voice breaking. You cannot let him do this. I am your father. I did it for us. I did it because I wanted to be part of it. Why? I asked. Why couldn't you just be happy for me? Douglas looked down at his hands. His shoulders shook, and then, for the first time in his life, he told the truth. Because it was supposed to be me, he whispered. I spent 40 years trying to get into this room. Riley, I spent 40 years buying the right suits, joining the right clubs, smiling at the right people, and you did it in a hoodie. You did it without playing the game. It made me feel small. So you tried to make me smaller, I said. I wanted to be the one who won, he admitted, a tear sliding down his cheek. I couldn't stand that you didn't need me. It was the confession I had waited a lifetime to hear. It was pathetic. It was tragic, but it was real. I looked at the man who had raised me. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was bankrupt. He was facing an SEC investigation. He was about to lose his home, and now he had lost his pride. I need a signature, Wexler said. Breaking the emotional spell, he slid the merger documents toward me. The offer stands, Riley, but the condition remains. We need a clean house. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, solid gold. I looked at Douglas. I am going to sign this, I said. And Kestrel Harbor is going to become a global leader in infrastructure defense. I am going to be the CEO. Stewart is going to be the chief legal officer. And me, Douglas asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Is there a way to help me? The mortgage? Riley? Your mother? I capped the pen. I will not pay your debts. Dad, I said, I will not pay off the mortgage you took out by lying about my company. I will not bail you out of the fraud you committed. Douglas flinched as if I had struck him. However, I continued, I will not let my mother starve. I have purchased a small 2-bedroom condo in the city. It is in her name. It is fully paid for. You can live there. It is not Emerald Heights. There is no country club, but it is a roof. A condo, Douglas sneered, his pride flaring one last time. You want Douglas Mercer to live in a condo. It is that or a cell, Stewart reminded him. And, I added, you have to issue a public retraction. You will write a statement, approved by Stewart, admitting that you exaggerated your relationship with Wexler and that you have no role in Kestrel Harbor. You will post it on your website. You will send it to every investor you lied to. That will humiliate me, Douglas whispered. That will liberate you, I said. You have spent your whole life pretending to be a billionaire. Dad, it is time to try just being a man. And if I want to work, he asked. If I want to rebuild. I looked at Wexler. We shared a look. Kestrel Harbor has an opening, I said. In the compliance department, entry-level data entry. You check the logs. You verify the facts. You report to a manager who reports to a manager who reports to me. The salary is $45,000 a year. It comes with health insurance. Douglas stared at me. You want me to work for you as a clerk. I want you to learn the value of honest work, I said. Take it or leave it. Douglas looked around the room. He saw the power. He saw the respect everyone had for me, not because of my name, but because of my actions. He realized that the story was no longer his to write. He stood up. He picked up his briefcase. He looked older than his years. I will think about the condo, he said. He turned to leave. He didn't look at Wexler. He walked to the door, and for the first time, he didn't swagger. He shuffled. The door closed behind him. The silence in the room was different now. It was clean. You handled that with remarkable restraint, Wexler said. Most people would have destroyed him. He destroyed himself, I said. I just refused to be the collateral damage. I opened the folder. I turned to the signature page. I signed my name, Riley Herrera, in bold. Black ink. Congratulations, Riley, Stewart said, placing his hand over mine. Thank you, I said. I looked out the window. Down on the street, I saw a small figure walking away from the building, merging into the crowd of ordinary people. He was just a man in a suit, indistinguishable from thousands of others. My father had said his partner was a billionaire until he walked into my board meeting, but the truth was, he never had a partner, and I never needed one. I had myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Juliet Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe while working on your own empire? Let me know in the comments below because I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed seeing Riley take back her power, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a reminder that success is the best revenge.